A disclaimer that this webinar is being recorded and we really look forward to your participation. Thank you, and over to you, Lalita.
Good evening for all those in the Eastern Hemisphere. Good morning to those who are joining us from the Western Hemisphere. It's so nice to have two sets of audiences from different parts of the world, so many audiences. So it's after a long time, in almost 4 months since our first webinar, and we're so excited to have all of you. And we realize that you've all taken a Saturday off and given us time and joined us here, and that itself is an excellent, something we are very grateful for. So thank you very much for joining us today and sparing 2 hours for this webinar. I hope you'll find it interesting, and we wish all of you to participate and be a part of this program. So when we started, India has 1.4 billion people, we all know that, and out of the 60% of them are in the employable age. And they say 1/3 of it is between the ages of 18 to 29. But do we really need English? Who needs English? We have so many people in so many sectors, and each one with a different need and different desire. I'm saying this because it's not that we learn English because we need it. Many learn English because they want to learn it too, because they probably feel that, very different, many reasons, which I am not so qualified as Joy. So I'm going to leave it to Joy to talk about that, the difference between need for English and desire for learning English. And even those who need, what kind of English do we need or desire? Different levels of people. And so for this was the focus of a webinar, English for Employability, in marginalized youth when we planned first on May 1st. But suddenly the second wave of pandemic hit us, and we were all very badly shaken. Now, after 2 months after the proposed earlier date, what kind of English do we need? Who needs English? What kind of English do we need? How is it related to business communication? These and many other questions are going to be discussed by three of our three eminent speakers. The first and foremost of them is Dr. Joy Deshmukh. Dr. Joy doesn't require much introduction, so I have really written a few words only about her. She's an economist by training and a social scientist by practice. She comes with over 3 decades of experience in the area of social development. She's an advisor and consultant to NGOs and corporates on issue of sustainability, CSR, gender and social programs. Dr. Joy retired as a global head of CSR at TCS, Tata Consultancy Services. And I personally have seen the amount of value she brought to every single program she was involved in. So we hope, she has won a number of national and international awards. I can keep on talking, but I think we'll let her speak for herself what she's going to say. Nilambari Rao is another person who is the second speaker today with us. Second is a trainer of repute. The kind of things she does is something which really amazed me, in spite of her qualification and the exposure she has had. She studied in France, French, she studied in UCLA, business management. In spite of everything, she's a very down-to-earth person, and she connects with people of all states of society. And what I today want to bring into your notice is she runs an NGO called Sujaya Foundation. Sujaya Foundation is a not-for-profit organization. It focused on bridging the digital and linguistic divide among the underprivileged and Indian youth. And it also aims to get them employability by training them with a very unique immersion program. She's worked with the Ministry of HRD and has helped to promote Graduate Plus programs, which provide a number of courses in a small and 2-tier cities. She had also worked with some other companies. Jayashree Menon, our third speaker, is an academic. She's a project in charge of business and a business communication trainer, and she works with ELTIS and English Language Teaching Institute of Symbiosis in Pune. I have known Jayashree for over 2 years now, and I have always found what I really liked about Jayashree is that she creates exercises and she creates material for the absolute need of the participants she faces. So that is a unique skill, because not everybody is able to create and engaging exercises. And this is a unique thing I found in Jayashree. She has also headed a number of things. She has run a program, English for Bharat. I remember the conference. How much she contributed for that. So she also works in a number of, she's worked with a number of other institutes, and she has also worked with underprivileged. So today's focus is mainly on the marginalized youth, and is English necessary? How much of English is necessary, and how it's related to business communication? And without going into any more detail, I'm going to give my first question to Joy, and Joy will set the webinar with this. Joy, what do you feel? What in your observation has been the difference between pre-COVID and post-COVID? We won't say post-COVID, COVID times. What is the difference in addressing the needs of the marginalized youth? What exactly are their needs? Do you think there's a difference which has come in with what it was earlier and what it's now? And how do you think it's going to help us in planning our English and business communication programs? Over to Joy.
Right. Lalita, that is quite a question. And you're giving me 5 minutes, so I'm going to cheat. And in case I need more minutes, I'm going to rob them from Jayashree and Nilambre.
Please,
because that's quite, yeah. Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, so pre-COVID, I can say from, my experience where when I was in the corporate sector, we ran a program for our own in-house staff, whether it was housekeeping or drivers and gardeners, and basically teaching them to speak English so that they could communicate with the employees and they could function in a better way. Now, what happened in that program was very, very interesting. One was we saw a very definite economic impact. So these were not necessarily the youth. Many of them had jobs. So, they were like the post-youth stage. But their skilling was upgraded and they became more employable than they were earlier. That was one thing that happened. The second thing that happened was with respect to their social standing. So their confidence levels increased, their social status they felt increased. They could participate in their own families where their children were studying in English medium schools. Incidentally, just today there has been a report that about a quarter of children in India are studying in what are called English medium schools. But what has to be understood is that even if the youth study in an English medium school, the most important hurdle is the fact that they learn to think in a vernacular language. So from childhood, they learn a vernacular language and then they learn English and then they're struggling to translate with very different sets of grammar and very different sets of vocabulary. So that hurdle then becomes an impediment in terms of confidence, in terms of being comfortable with the language. Now, not being comfortable with the language is one thing on its own. But the other thing is the fear of ridicule, because if you say marginalized youth, they could be class-related marginalization, poor youth. It could be caste-related, so it could be Dalits and scheduled tribes. It could be gender, so it could be women versus, the girls versus the boys. So there are different, it could be differently abled, disability. So the fear of ridicule is very, very deep and it is inbuilt in social hierarchies. So on top, you see it as just, a discomfort with English. But English is a parameter, a marker that keeps you excluded from another group. So which is why I always see an English program as something which is part of diversity and inclusion. So you're actually trying to pull in a group that has been hitherto excluded. Now, in that, there are two strategies that can be used. One is where you pay special attention to that group, which is very necessary because you have to identify their needs. You have to see what relevance it has to their, life, the life they live, and then you formulate your modules. So there is a relevance. So it could be situational relevance. I have to go for an interview. So how do I face that? Or I have to enter an office premise. What am I going to find in the office premise? There am I at a loss for words to find my way through, even to get to a certain door that I have to get to. But if you just keep only focusing on that group, there could be what is called a ghettoization, and then you're only keeping them excluded because of the factors that are keeping them marginalized. So the second part of the strategy is to mainstream them. Now, in mainstreaming, there is an acceptance of the rest of the group that is comfortable with the language. So these two elements are very important in any social program if you want to introduce English more than just a kind of a surface thing where you just say, okay, my name is so and so, so and so, I need to go to this door, or I need to face this job interview. So if you really want to see some kind of social change, if you want to see diversity being included, then these things are important. Now, having said that, so this was pre-COVID, and of course it's still relevant now. But what COVID did was, it put life before livelihoods. So where English speaking was something that got you a better livelihood, got you a better job, it made you a better entrepreneur, it allowed you to maybe, facilitate online transactions. Now it was life over livelihood. So even NGOs that are working with groups and working with add-ons like, financial literacy, legal literacy, English as a language, they are finding now that the resources are not available. Because, you can understand, they're all being diverted into providing of hospital beds or oxygen, or because it's life over livelihoods. That's one thing. The second thing that has happened is there has been a complete disempowerment in the minds of everyone at large, and the youth in particular, because what does a process of disempowerment do? It knocks the future out of your mind. So when you're hit with such a horrible thing like a pandemic, where you're mentally affected, you're physically affected, you're financially affected, the future just vanishes. So do we have an answer? Do we have something within our strategies, our modules, where we incorporate English, where we incorporate some kind of, a plus component that can put back the future in the minds of the youth, basically giving them hope. So this plus factor is very important. Now, what is this plus factor? So all of you all who are working in the sector will know that the mental health has been affected very badly. So you may have a student coming to you to learn English, but you realize that the person is in a very bad place mentally. So you're probably spending an hour talking to that student before that student even enrolls for your class, or even after the student enrolls for your class. So that is one important thing. The second is data, collecting of data on what has happened, what is the impact of the pandemic on these youth. That is the second thing that is very important. Jobs have been lost, livelihoods have been lost. Is there some kind of opening of doors in entrepreneurship? So like I said, in the corporate that I worked in, we had a program called Bridge IT, where we worked with Dalit youth and made them technologically able so that they could become like the hub and the nodal points for facilitating community level work, whether it was passport, Aadhaar card, this, and they would charge a fee for it. So can they be roped into vaccination, getting databases together, awareness building? So is there a place for that kind of work to be done? A lot of online transactions, a lot of students. Swiggy is sending SMSs all the time because they need people on board. So can we work with Swiggy, for example, in trying to enhance the abilities of their courier boys and girls. So are there other doors that we have not looked at earlier that can be opened? So, but basically, like I said, the process of disempowerment has to be addressed. So that I'll stop there because we can take this up in the subsequent discussion also. But this plus component, where earlier the plus component was etiquette or hygiene, which is all still relevant. Now the plus component is different. So that plus component, what is it? Can we dismantle it? Can we incorporate it? Can we have modules which have relevance to the lives of the youth that we are working with? I mean, I'd stop there, and Nilambari and Jayashree are there. I mean, they're working in the field, so they'll be able to, elaborate some more. Yeah.
Thanks, Joy. I too have a whole lot of questions on that. I thought it's a fantastic thing, the plus factor which you have brought in, which as we as trainers should look in. Let me ask Nilambari and Jayashree if they have something for you. Anything you would like to ask, Nilambari?
Well, no, I think she's put it very well. The plus factor is something that we are also grappling with, but I would, and I'm happy that she brought up the mental health issue, because there is, like she said, while we are trying to empower, there is actually a feeling of disempowerment. But one of the nice things I find is because of this pandemic, I mean, I can't say because of the pandemic, but let's say because of the remote work from home situation, and the fact that so many people have just kind of not been able to get out of the house, we have been able to get at our NGO really quality mentors, because suddenly people are willing to give off their time, like to get a CEO to give a really inspiring talk for 40 minutes would have been impossible actually earlier, because we would have liked to bring them to the center and then etc. etc. But now, plus people have been feeling, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? So I think Joy's point, which is a very powerful point, that all the work that we are doing, there's a feeling of despair. But I also think this is a nice part of kind of bringing in hope through the back door. And I don't know, Lalita, you have a question, or shall I just take it on from?
No. I was just thinking it's a fantastic, what you're saying is, because I personally felt in this pandemic that so many people have come forward to help people.
Well,
it's
yes.
more than what the government does or what the private institutions do. It is individuals who have come forward to put in their best. And I think from what you say, it's very clear that individuals are. So as individuals, what are we doing? What can be done? Something we'll take up later. And Jayashree has any question? Otherwise, you can talk. Jayashree?
Yes. Joy, well said. Yes, I would just like to mention that, yes, here it will be nice if we start a bridge course for these people who are ready to have like the gig workers. It is an informal word, yes, but it's like a contract and flexi job, so that they are comfortable with a job also. And here we can provide as facilitators some help as a bridge course too, with mental and English language skills. That will be really helpful for them.
Right.
Okay, I'll just give my second question, because I thought Joy has so beautifully set the context and given us what we have to look for. Now, Nilambari running an NGO will give us, in her experience, the NGO that trains marginalized youth in English. What are the trends that you notice in the hiring process where English is concerned? Do you think that there has been shift as a result of the pandemic? You just started. Please continue, Nilambari.
English remains like Joy mentioned, to mainstream them. There is no question that English language skills are absolutely key. But we do notice a couple of things. I think one is that employers right now are really focusing on job skills rather than some of the other, what we call soft skills, which are actually not soft and very difficult. and which we really found spending time on that was really difficult. Now, employer, acha, usko tally, does he know tally? Now, how he walks into the office or what are his team building skills, for the time being, that has kind of taken a back seat. Literally, I feel a back seat. And what I mean is that actually the proficiency to work online is what has taken precedence. The ability actually to just listen and respond quickly. Whereas earlier we would spend a lot of time on many courses which kind of looked at other talents, I would say, which is presenting yourself and selling yourself. Right now, those modules, actually they come in the form of these guest speakers who talk. We are not spending too much time on them. So I don't want to use the word hard skills and soft skills, but I would say, okay, does he know tally? If it's a person who's done a little bit of Java, okay, we can just sell, okay, he knows Java, he has a computer at home, he can do this for you. So I would say that some of the hard work that, a youth were putting in, and often they would get disappointed when they would go for an interview, that is a little bit, that has brought some level of hope, because skills like Java, skills like Excel, objective, measurable. How does he speak English? How does he present himself is a little more subjective and difficult to. So I would say really that this is a bit of a change, but I would say not much in terms of, I mean, our modules do remain the same to a certain extent, but these factors have taken precedence. I hope I have answered the question.
Yeah, very interesting. Nilambari, I agree with you that any soft skill is meaningless, or even good English is meaningless unless you have basic technical skills in that field. If you're a finance person, you should have tally and other things. If you're a software engineer, you should be good in coding. Without knowing anything on coding, just speaking good English will not get you a job. But what I like about is that you've said it shifted from the way they dress, the way they talk. But still on virtual platforms, how you talk is important, isn't it?
Yes.
So which of the soft skills do you think are relevant in today's situation? You can think over it. If anyone else has any other question, you can answer. Sorry, I was so carried away by what you people say that I started writing down my own questions.
Oh, no.
Thank you, really, very, very interesting. You have some question, Joy or Jayashree?
She was talking about the Desi approach to British English. Right? Because as you rightly said, it is more of livelihood rather than the soft skills. But as Lalita said that yes, in this pandemic situation, we are all the time online and virtual mode. So certain skills they need to develop. And of course, I feel that it will be developed through practice. So that's my opinion. And that is quite essential. But yes, of course, not the right, yes, American English or something like that, but just to be presentable and how I can communicate and you understand what I want to communicate. Then the communication is successful over there.
Yeah, so I was wondering, Nilambari, that, I mean, what you said was absolutely right, that the technical skills of the job are important. So what will be the happy mix then, of English? And then, like, as I kind of always say, that English as a means to an end. So the anxiety is to get a job. So knowing enough English to get me the job. But then is it going to be part of my life? Is it going to, is it going to do the other thing that I said? Is it going to mainstream me with somebody who is comfortable with the language? So I think that would be built into the program that is designed. So it's not that it's bad to have a functional English module, which is a means to an end. It's not bad or anything. But if you have the design in mind, then you can work towards certain impacts. Otherwise, you know, you will be kind of going in one direction and expecting that the impact should be something else. And then that doesn't work.
We are working a lot on that also, because what we find is that mainstreaming them is one thing, but getting them also what they deserve is another, which has got to do a lot with the policy of the company. For example, even though a person is doing the same work as a graduate, he will never get a promotion, or he will never get the same. So along with English, you know, a very important part is to actually ensure that every marginalized, anyone who comes to the NGO rather, is pursuing some form of further study. Because I think English, and for that they need to be able to answer questions in English. So I would say there is I would say that there is a focus, or from employers I'm talking about, that let us take English as a functional tool, but at the same time, in terms of life and livelihood, okay, you can have a decent livelihood even if you're not convent speaking English, but for life in that corporate, you will need it. So it is a very delicate balance. We struggle with it every day.
Yeah, no, what you said is absolutely right. It also depends on the sector. So if there's a direct customer connect, like you have in the service sector, then the relevance is sharper than if you don't have a customer connect. And then there's another issue of compounded discrimination. So you could be differently abled and, you know, from the marginalized community. And in that case, then what is being done? So I would think that, you know, whether it is us as a group or whether it's an NGO that is working in this area, what is it that you want? So if you want diversity and you want inclusion, then that strategy will be different. If you want just so that the job is got, then the strategy will be different. And I'm not saying any one strategy is superior to the other strategy, but it all will depend on where you're locating that English language program and where it is sitting, and therefore what is it that is what value is it bringing, and then therefore it will be designed in that way.
Yeah, totally.
You know, that is world over, English language training is moving towards more soft skill training. So you have in English, you also think of mindfulness, you think of empathy and other things, but language of empathy, language of language of negotiation, language of persuading. So language, though you're dealing with soft skills, it has to be, they also need to say how to do that in English. So I understand what you're saying, and it's important. Definitely the needs, everything is dependent on the needs of the person and the sector he's working and the level he starts with. So it's been really, really very interesting. So let me ask Jayashree Jayashree, what do you kind of motivational approach do you think is necessary to teach English, considering this post-pandemic situation? We've already talked. How can we do this, especially if the target audience includes marginal? How can you motivate them, and what kind of English are you going to teach them? And, and do you think as a trainer, you can incorporate these in your curriculum?
Thank you for the question, Lalita. Yes, life is definitely 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. So that is the motivational approach we have to put across. Yes, Joy really clearly said that they have a mental aspects which we have to find out. So make them realize that you are important and what you are learning is important. And of course, in that learning, English is a factor. It's not the be all and end all of it, but it is necessary. And as facilitators, we will not give up. We are always there to back you, and you can do it. So this attitude and this motivation of a facilitator will definitely help them. And of course, we can pitch their problems which they are facing right now. That is, yes, most of them have faced the tumultuous period like that. So why can't we pitch on that turning in from that is ashes right from the ashes attitude and the seeds of hope? So we can put in that seeds of hope. So what seeds of hope will we put in? Definitely the Prime Minister of India has put in so many programs, NGOs have come up, then the crowdsourcing is there. So we can help them giving these guidelines. And then of course we can tell them, yes, to emphasize these life skills, you have got ample of opportunities like small scale jobs. Then why don't you work on the natural resources which you have? The rural area has got a tremendous resources which they can focus. And of course, through that, how they can come up with a little English. Okay, I'm not saying it's hi-fi English, but yes, with that English, they can come up. So this kind of motivation, and we can help them as facilitators. And of course, Lalitha, you asked me what are the strategies which we have used. Yes, lockdown and learn from home method, no doubt about it. And yes, we try to treat the participants as owners of learning. We gave them something, so come up with their stories, then try to say their stories, let them do errors, make errors, and then let them learn from their errors. So unlearn the learned skills. That was one strategy which we used. Then Joy had said that, yes, that gives in competition to them. Yes, so with this online learning, what I have found is, they do not have that problem to come up and speak, because they know that if I switch off the video, I'm off. So, but I can speak. So we can put in that competition also. So it's a healthy competition. So educate, engage, and of course, that is excite them with activities, as ma'am rightly said. Yes, we do that. And a little bit of videos, asynchronous, synchronous learning. I'm not using the words, yes.
Good.
So the asynchronous and synchronous learning, we give them something, come up with the solutions. So such kind of strategies also have helped them to learn. So finally they come different, but together they go. That is what we have seen. So I'm not saying these are the final solutions or anything, but these are some of the solutions.
Very nice, very nice.
Thank you.
Actually, very nice. And you know, I think the three of them, what you've said, are connected. The plus factor, which Joy said,
Yes.
the plus factors which you have to pay attention when you're doing. And one thing with my personal experience, which Nilamari actually brought out, is that, you know, during this pandemic, I have been able to reach out to people whom I haven't trained before. I'm doing training for rural areas because it's all online. Physical presence is not anymore required, as you say. So the people hide behind if they have to talk, you have to literally coax them and make them talk. I'm really learning a lot in the pandemic, and we are going to get many more volunteers to work during this time. So any kind of training, because they don't have to be physically present. So the cost factor is almost nil, but online learning also has others. So I find that what three of you have said, what Joy has said, what Nilamari has said, what you've said, have all, you know, flown from one to, I mean, it has been a flow. There's been a flow from what Joy said. I could, you know, all this. I'm really, really thankful to both of you, or three of you, for whatever you have said. I require some closing comments, whatever you feel about it. Because this discussion, my greatest fear when I started moderating was I'll get so involved in the discussion, I'll forget to say what I have. And that's already happened. I've got so involved in what three of you have said that I myself have ideas, but I like to learn from you what you feel that, I mean, what do you feel about the whole thing, and how can the whole thing, what strategies we can bring together in creating a program from what all of you said, your own, even, you see, I feel that whatever you, in any program or any webinar, we are not talking in air. There should be something which we pick up, which you can incorporate in your work. So could you give the participants something, what you feel can be incorporated? Just closing comments, kind of. Joy. Think about anything. Because what I have learned is people in India, when you do training, they say pronunciation is not important. But for the marginalized communities, pronunciation is important. Because that's especially with virtual learning, because this is the way it need not be an American accent or a British accent, but a clear Indian accent is necessary, especially in now. So things like that, a lot of learning has happened for me personally. But I would like your views on what you think can be a takeaway from what you've said for the participants in this session. Anything you feel?
So I would think of it in two ways, Lalita. One is those many of us who are already into training. What is it that we can do differently, or what is it that we can tweak, or add some more of the plus component? That's one thing. The other is to formulate something completely new, keeping the marginalized with a partnership with some NGOs, maybe one NGO or several NGOs, and then design the program in such a way that you expect, and we track that, we track that group of youth to see where it is that they're going and what is it that the language is, what value the language is adding to their lives. So I can see it in two ways. And definitely volunteering. So, if there are any in this group also who would want to be part of it, it could be just, in a discussion, or it could be participating in modules, or it could be like you had suggested the other day, Lalita, just observing. So, there's a session on, and then somebody sits in, a couple of people sit in and see what is happening, because there's a lot that happens which maybe a trainer may not be able to catch, because you're so involved in the training. So an observer may be able to catch. Then I liked also what Jaya brought out about the anonymity of the screen. So you can turn off the video and you can make mistakes, and I think that's huge. That's huge, because half the time even I like to turn off the video. So why not use you, instead of lamenting, that there's no face-to-face, or that, the people connect is not there. Why don't we look at something positive and see how it is that we can harness, identify the sectors which will require, that kind of upskilling. So the service sectors, and a database. I mean, I'm all for localized, even if it's a smallish database. So if you're working with an NGO, does the NGO have any clue about what is happening with their youth, with whom they want to work? Post the pandemic. How many of them got affected? What did they do? How much of awareness do they have? Are they like, in despair, or are they kind of just like loitering here and there because they have like literally are lost? I mean, I'm not being negative. Or are they being entrepreneurial and thinking of new ways of reinventing themselves? So if we can help in that reinvention, because right now the entire world is reinventing itself. So in whichever way we can, whether it is English language, whether on the surface, people may think, is it relevant? I mean, how can English be relevant? But no, if you're reinventing something, everything has a place. So that's my two-bit word.
Thank you. Thank you. Nilabari, what would you like to say?
To sum up, I would like to say, yes, in terms of hope and despair, I would like to say a couple of things. There is a certain, let us say, sector within marginalized youth, and I think Joy touched upon it earlier, which are the mentally and physically challenged. We have found it difficult, what we talk about reinvention, etc. We have found it difficult for them. There is no two ways about it, because many of them don't have access to a smartphone, some things which are nowadays required to reinvent. But in terms of training, I think what has been very useful to us is this flipped classroom model, they are coming out with so many ideas, because, we are pushing them to kind of think of other things, exactly what Joy said. So, for example, somebody who never thought that I can learn how to drive, because Amazon has a lot of demand right now, for example, for people. So something that, like a underprivileged youth never dreamt that I will be able to get a loan, and I will be able to, but for that also, yes, you do need to be able to present yourself. So this reinvention is happening, and that is why I really like our topic. What is the hope coming out? Something that they have never thought. Oh, I'm going to, ride a motorbike. So forget about the fact that earlier he wanted to be in an office and he wanted to, have this kind of a job or that kind of a job. So I think, yes, there is, to sum it up, I would say there is a certain level of despair amongst a certain class, at least at our NGO, a certain sector, not class. At the same time, yes, there is a great deal of reinvention in areas that one could have never dreamt of.
Thank you. Jayashree, would you like to say something?
Yes, rightly, as Neelambari said that, yes, what are their needs? So we should understand that and then try to remove the barriers and then come up with a big solution that, yes, it will be a relief for them. So we can connect with a culturally related topic and ask them what do they need. So then according to that, we can prepare a module or something which meets the needs of it. And yes, as she rightly said, the flipped classroom, and other than that, the flipped classroom, we can make them as the textbook owners also. What do you need? So we will prepare. So you are also a part of it. So come on, we can give you this. So it's like give and take between both, and then come up with a new curriculum which will help all of them and build back better.
Thank you. Actually, it's been very, very interesting. I too felt that I've also looked at this pandemic more as an opportunity for giving back or doing something, and how much richer it makes you. People think that when you're working with marginalized people or people in need, they think that they are doing a favor. But in reality, the people who are it's the people who are doing you a favor. Especially, I felt this always, because they are showing you certain things which you had never imagined. And secondly, it brings closer to reality. So how much you gain from a session you're working with with marginalized youth, much more than what they gain from you. I mean, this is my personal experience. I feel that you gain a lot when you're in terms of affection, in terms of intangibles which cannot be measured. See, money is not the only factor. There is a lot of just so many things which I'm not going to talk about. But anyway, thank you very much. I think we at Verify, when we are definitely, this discussion has been very invigorating for me, definitely. And it has brought in some clarity on a direction we need to go as business English trainers. What's the direction we need to take? We are also planning to partner with certain NGOs or certain organizations which are specifically working with COVID affected people, in the hope of creating not just business English training, it's more coaching, because each person's need is so different. So we are working on that, and we hope we can do that apart from reaching out to people. And then definitely will require the help of everyone in this call, not just 2, 3, 4 us. And thank you very much. And I think now we should open up for questions. Ishita, will you take up the questions?
Sure. Thank
you, Joy. Thank you, Neelambari, and thank you, Jayashree. But now the questions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, all of you. And there have been a constant flurry of questions and comments. I will try to take up questions as in the order that they came from the participants. So the first question was from Shiva, and he asks, do you have an experience of English within quotes language training on speech or hearing impaired persons? I think Neelambari did touch on it a little. over to you, speakers, if any of you would like to respond.
I can take that question. No, we do not have a special session for them, but during our regular session, we help them, and but we focus more on helping them once they get the job. So at that time, our supervisor or a facilitator is with them in the office for almost 1 month to ensure that they are properly integrated. We meet their supervisors, we meet few of their colleagues. So no, during the training, they need the same things almost. And we find that employers also are very sensitive to these people. Plus, they like them very much because there's very little attrition. Now, once they have that job, plus they don't spend on training, because we have a real life BPO which actually trains them in, for example, trains them in HDFC processes. So HDFC, saves a lot of money in training them. And afterwards, they don't want to leave and that is a big thing for employers. So they do invest and they help. But to answer your question, no, we do not have a separate component for them.
Right. Thanks, Nilambari. I'll move on to the next question. This is from Shweta. And Nilambari, this was, I think, addressed for you. But the others can come in. What are the trends in the hiring industry which you noticed where English is concerned? Do you feel there has been a shift as a result of the pandemic?
Ishita, I'm sorry to jump in. I was just reframing the question Lalita had asked Nilambari.
Yes, and I think Nilambari has spoken about it at length. So I'll move along to the next question.
Yes.
It's from Hemang, and he asks, what changes would be needed in the course or curriculum that we design for the youth? What changes in the methodology should we seek?
Jayashree, will you take that?
Sorry, could you repeat that question once again? I was just looking at the chat box, sorry.
Sure. It says, what changes would be needed in the course or curriculum that we design for the youth? And what changes in the methodology should we seek?
Oh, thank you for the question. Yes, of course, it is the first point. What we have to understand is their attention span. So we have to think of their attention span and then make the curriculum which is relevant to them. See, now, if I teach, I'm just giving an example. If I teach grammar, I cannot start saying that, yes, present tense is sun rises in the east. So this is a sentence which everyone tells you and teaches you. No, we cannot, because we have to deal with them. And yes, so do you like to smoke? Do you like to go for a date? So with these kind of questions, yes, they will be at par with us. So the curriculum should be matching with their likes and dislikes. And the technology is at our fingertips now. So there are so many apps. Now, I'm not talking about the marginalized. If it is for the marginalized also, I have read that there are so many packs which are given as by the government, and there are so many NGOs also for working. So they can also have it. So there are several apps which really help them to change and learn it according to their timings. So because they are all couch potatoes, so the youths, so they would like to learn it at their leisure. So we would like to make a curriculum which suits according to their requirements. That is my answer.
Customize.
Yes.
But I think Joy also has done a lot with the rural people. Joy, what do you feel about going for the differently abled people? Because I think TCS had something to do with the blind and things like that, I remember. But
yeah, so it's not a homogeneous cohort when you say differently abled. There are very different kinds of differently able people. And like I said, programs have to be designed which are relevant for their needs. So definitely you would have to get a subject matter expert on board. It's not something that, it's a technical area of expertise. And only then can something be designed which would be relevant for that cohort. So that is what I would feel. And the other thing which is very important, because we did a lot of work with visually impaired, is that is there somebody who wants to employ them? Because I think there is something bordering on it being emotionally, if I may use a harsh word, criminal, in building up a hope of somebody and then not being able to get the job. So it has to work backwards. So you have to work with organizations that are willing to interview this cohort. So it's a fair chance that you get. It's not that you're being guaranteed a job, but at least you get a fair chance to be interviewed. And that is very, very important. So we did a lot of work with visually impaired, and it used to be an amazing program. The way they could do not only software but hardware, and they could fix the computer if something went wrong with it. And oftentimes, before the course got over, they would be already employed. But over time, we found that organizations don't tend to put this on priority. So it's on a lower priority. So if there is a resource crunch, then these are the ones that fall off the table. So I think it's a sensitive area to work in, and that sensitivity has to be kept in mind when you're designing, and it has to be an end-to-end solution. You can't kind of just, this is true for all trainings. In fact, you can't just train somebody and then just leave them and say, okay, bye. And not when you're already marginalized and you're already you already have there's no equity in the level playing field. So when there's no equity in the level playing field, some support has to be given so that equity is achieved. I'm not talking of equality. I'm talking of equity.
Understood. Sorry, Ishita, sorry. Please continue.
Yeah, just to add to that, what you said, Joy, that is like it is working backwards. We are just you have to work backwards and find a solution for what do they require.
Yeah. Right.
Ishita, your next question. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, that was worth every second of the discussion. So thank you for bringing it up. The next question is from Freya, and it says, most of the automated or the AI applications for learning and evaluating language learning, I suspect, what has been, this for Nilambari, and says, what has been the experience for marginalized youth in your NGO for language learning, given that most of the automated application for learning and evaluating language is from the American context and might be found alien by this cohort?
Freya, to answer very simply, we have an in-house course. We don't use many applications, etc. We have an in-house course which teaches, which evaluates, and we have created this course after discussions with approximately 12 to 15 HR managers. What do they want and we are only talking at our NGO, it's only entry-level jobs. So, it's not, we don't, so it's created in-house.
Right. Jayashree or Joy, would you have any inputs about the AI applications? Any experiences or any?
No, sorry.
Ishita, I don't think we have, most of the AI applications we don't use because they don't really go in. Even like I was talking about Duolingo and apps also, We have now a number of Indian apps like Hello English, which may not be so good, but it's suited to Indian audience. So I don't think people use anymore these imported applications. At least when I was in TCS, we never used, because I never found any of them that good. Even the best of them used to reject us on our pronunciation.
Right, and one has to be practical also, Lalita. I mean, are you teaching the student to read the classics, or is it functional English?
Absolutely.
So that border, has to be that has to be drawn. I'm not saying you lower the standards, but you have to know, what is your constraint maximization problem that you're operating within. So.
Right. Thank you. I'll move on to the next question. Could analytics from webinars be used to help improve communication skills of marginalized youth? Is anyone leveraging this? If yes, how?
We are not. It's difficult.
See, anyway, I'm sorry I'm interrupting, but Yishita, this question is not applied to marginal youth at all, because the kind of language spoken in webinars, they just will not understand. Or even, it doesn't make, for them, their English is not something they want to be very good at for anything else except to do well in their jobs. Even for social mobility, they are not interested in, I don't think, analytics from webinar. What I understand is, what kind of webinars? It depends. Are you talking about webinars conducted in colleges? Are you talking about, because webinars can be anything. Number of webinars could be on any subject too. So what analytics of which webinars or which type of webinars, I think we should make a difference. Because I don't know, that's what I feel personally, that webinar is it's just a tool. The content of webinars are different. So the analytics, how will it help? Whether people, I don't know. I haven't understood this question. I don't. How are activities used during webinars?
What we can do is we have that. It was Chai who asked this question, and she is on the the.
So what exactly?
When we have the 30-minute informal discussion, maybe we could elaborate and have the conversation. And in the meantime, just move on to another question.
Yeah, from Nimi, I think it's asked a question. Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Ishita,
yes,
but we just have 2 minutes left. So would we like to formally close the session at 5? And we would be very happy to have the others stay on. We have the informal interaction from 5 to 5:30.
But Dolon, we can ask everyone to switch on their video so that we can take a final shot.
Exactly. So let's formally close the session now, Ishita, and then we'll carry on the discussion.
Sure. We'll do that.
Yes.
So may we request everyone to
switch on their videos.
If possible.
I think Jayashree is still on the, oh no, or maybe it's my view.
That's true. I'm pinched.
Sorry.
Right.
I said I don't know about the photograph, but seeing familiar faces makes me very happy.
Yes. Seeing so many faces makes me happy.
Yes.
Familiar or otherwise.
Thanks.
I have to stop myself from saying hi.
Durga, you're not on. Your video is not on. Okay, fine.
Say somehow I could not, get through my laptop, so I'm on my tab. So I'm trying to figure out.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah.
Colin also. I haven't. Yes, Colin.
Thank you, everyone. I think
there's one more, so you can take both the shots.
Shweta, do we have them?
If Moitri, Radhika, and Rahul are okay with turning on their cameras.
I'm here if I can be seen.
Yeah,
Yes,
we can
yes,
see
yes.
you.
Okay.
Okay, now everybody please look at your cameras and smile.
Yeah.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
we have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very illuminating. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, a silver million.
Thank you. And before everyone leaves, if I could please request you to fill the feedback forms. The link will be in the chat soon.
And those who can stay back for questions. We're going to be on for another half an hour. Those who don't mind staying back can stay back for questions.
Yes, and before we officially start the informal session, we would just like to share a small video that we have of the work that we do at BEC-FI. So we are happy to share it.
Thanks, Shashika.
So that was a snippet of BEC-FI. And just to keep everyone posted, we look forward to having all of you. This is our announcing our upcoming event, a webinar. We'll be coming out with the details soon. But that is going to be our next event, a fireside chat on brain-friendly learning with Rachel Paling. So keep a tab on our social media channels, and we will keep you informed. And all of you who are members of BEC-FI, you will shortly receive a recording of this and the other webinars. So if you would like to be informed of our events and would like to receive the recordings of our webinars, even if you're unable to attend, do join our website, do become a member. And to become a member, you can find all the information on becfi.com. I'll just put that down on the chat.
Thank you.
And
that's it. Any
questions? So thank you everyone for your participation, and you are most welcome, all of you, to stay back for the next 30 minutes. We are going to take up all those questions, all the comments, conversations that we want to have, because this is one topic I think that we cannot have enough of. So
the feedback link is in the chat box. Please, if you could fill it before you leave, and thank you everyone for joining. We'll close the session formally now and move to the informal session.
Chai, I need to understand your question. So let's have.
Yes, Chai.
Chai, I need to understand your question.
Right, you know, when we use activities a lot during the webinars or workshops that we conduct, even for business English, right? Or communication, largely. So my question is, does anybody, once we do these activities, do we look back at, you know, like if it was in school, we would look back at the, whatever, how people would do in those exercises that were given as classwork or homework or whatever. So if I take my webinar, my business English or my English classes, webinar that I'm taking for that particular day as a classroom activity, as a class, and the different activities as the classwork that a student would do we go back to those activities? Like we might have them through online tools. I mean, maybe through Menti or something like that, right? We give activities, people respond to them, we discuss it, and then it's over and done with. Do we go back to the analytics and see how many responded, what was the rate, where were the problem areas, how do we deal with them, how can those activity get better? That's what I was wondering, because that is, how should I say, a treasure trove. I mean, I personally don't look at it, but it just struck me while this discussion was going on. Perhaps that is something also which is readily available to us, but we don't really, leverage it to the maximum. I'm not sure if I'm making sense though.
Yes, understood. Chai, this is what I call reflection at the end of the program. And sometimes I ask this in the feedback, which was the activity you enjoyed most and which was the activity you enjoyed least.
Lalita, my point is different. It's not from the point of enjoyment, right?
I know. Have you understood which was effective and not effective? Is it?
So let's say we do during an hour of the workshop, we have 3 activities, okay? And 3 of them require people to respond in different ways, through a word cloud, through a multiple choice question, etc. Now we discuss the responses for the group to get an understanding.
Yes.
And then we move on to the next, and then we move on to the next, and the workshop is over. But the tool that we would have used for creating these exercises, so to say, do look at the analytics that tool generates, and do we use that for, let's say, the next upcoming workshop with that same batch? If we have a recurring workshop with a batch, like if it's a long-term.
Understood. What you're trying, I've followed. Chai, sorry, I personally have used SurveyMonkey. I personally feel I'm more comfortable with SurveyMonkey than with Google Forms. SurveyMonkey, I have, when I've started a new group, I've used that analytics, but things change even within a group of 100 people. What you plan for a 30 is different. Though I have the analytics and I think, okay, probably they will like this. But I found that for each group, the needs are slightly different. So the approach also of mine has been very different. Even if it is 100, like for example, I did for rural area, 100 people answered the survey. The first 20, the strategies I used, I'm trying to teach the same thing to the next 25. I find that I have to change my strategy. So the tool, I don't know how effective it will be. Understanding it, yes, it does say that, but the data is to some extent useful, but I don't know. I haven't taken, but because I do with different people, so that even the questions.
Right. So it's not the same batch that you see over, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah, the second batch. I'm doing for the second batch. I did for one batch of 25 people. The strategies I used. Now I find that I have to change the complete strategy for the second 25 batch.
Right.
Second batch of the same group.
But that same batch, right? You get them over a long period, right?
Yeah, then only you get it. Correct.
So my question was that when I have a batch for a long period, I'm seeing them over 5 weeks, over, I don't know.
Yes.
Or multiple times during a week. When I'm meeting the same batch, yes, the bond happens, etc. There would be some patterns. I'm not saying there is. But have any of us explored it? And if yes, I'm just curious to find out, what does that tell us about where the training is going, how we adapt, all of that.
Yeah, it's a good question, because I feel that, what I find that this is what Joy brought. That thing is, we are dealing not just with language, we are dealing with their feelings, we are dealing with their social economic situation, their confidence level. So many things are there, when you take this group. So I don't know whether some activity. I have done 20 years of training now. 2002 I started training. It's almost 20 years I've done only business communication training. It has always been veering towards confidence building, veering towards other things, because it's not pure language, and therefore it's different for different people. This is my experience. I'm sure other people may have had some of it. What you're saying is true, but it is, I don't somehow feel you can use analytics for language learning. This is my experience, but the others may have had something.
I would disagree with you there, Lalita. I think analytics are important.
Yeah, they are important.
Where did they respond most? You know, during the course of a session, we rarely catch on to that. It's when we later on reflect on it, we say, this is an activity which makes everyone respond. So how democratic was my activity? So I do think we can bring in more inclusiveness through our activities later on by looking at analytics. I think this is a topic, you know, we can occupy our entire 30 minutes. So rather, let's move to the next question. Ishita, I think there were other questions.
May I just butt in?
Yes.
So, I mean, I don't have the experience that all of you have, but I was just wondering that when you give a response, there is a very definite personal perception attached to it. So the response need not actually be what happened at that moment in time. So is there any way that the online training is recorded and you can play it back and see something in it? I mean, pardon me if it's an idiot question, but you know, I was just wondering.
No. It has to be recorded and seen again. Otherwise, how do we see it? It's very important. For the reflection, we can't bank on our memory or just a machine to pull out things. What we want to analyze is our choice. So we have to see.
I have done this. I have recorded all the 5 sessions which I've taken so far, 5 + 2, 7 sessions. I've only gone through one of them again. Going through 5 hours of recorded sessions is quite, 10 hours of recorded session is pretty tiring. But I've only gone through one of them. So it is good this way. What I asked is very good, because with online tools and with Zoom and things, you can record your sessions. So when you're recording and you go back, then you realize maybe I could have done this better. What she says is absolutely true. They may not be analytics, but it could be, I mean, I'm not an analytical person like that. But yes, it does improve your teaching.
So may I add here?
Please.
Yes, so it's like, as Lalita said, it's not analytics, but yes, recently we had the same problem that we had done a Kahoot quiz, and it worked out well with one team, and the other team, it was really a flop show. So then we sat and found out what went wrong, it was like a boring show for them. So it was like the questions were not challenging for them. So they have really given us a feedback that yes, Kahoot was the biggest flop in that training. So we had to go back and then we checked that yes, so we can't do the same, yes, one size fits all approach in this one.
Madam, I want to intervene. After the bolt from the blue, a toy pistol takes the opportunity to speak a few words. I totally agree with all the valuable inputs given by the chairpersons. The big question is how far the youth are assimilating English language. We are bringing English very close to them. It should not become a body activity. Rather, it should become a heart activity, because language is meant for life, not for a single day business. The whole activity of life is enrolled with it. So I presume that the youth should be carried in this way to realize their ample opportunities. I have seen so many young girls, rural girls, they are selling flowers. They don't have even the money to buy mobiles. I've seen a girl who has picked up some bucks to buy a second-hand mobile phone. She was very much active, and she participated in all the online classes. She came first in the class. So the pandemic has really taught us what we cannot do. We can do so many things. We have to introspect.
Thank you. I mean, I think these are very important points. But just, Ishita, I think there were a few more questions Would
Edward,
we want to take them? Yes.
Yes. So one question was, I think it was from Colin, and he says, in my interaction with marginalized youth for promoting English in rural areas across Maharashtra and Gujarat, many language teachers express their lack of proper English communication even to their students. They express a desire to be trained to communicate fluently in English. How can we address this problem? So it's for the trainers.
I think Colin has left.
But it's still a relevant question.
Very relevant question. Very, very important, I think.
Trainers working in rural India, even they want upskilling. They need upskilling. So
yes. And this is an informal session. So anyone, it's not just the speakers or the organizers, anyone who would like to unmute and share anything about this, because I'm sure you would have, please feel free to do so.
Yes. So I have had a little experience with this because I freelance with Cambridge English for their orientation sessions, and have done a couple of train the trainer programs for trainers working in second tier cities, towns. Haven't been to villages yet. And you know, the sheer enthusiasm they have to learn, and unfortunately they do not really have a lot of avenues. They don't know where to go. They don't have, first of all, they are not aware of what's available. This could be for a host of reasons, you know, not having access to the internet, not being aware that there are institutes that can give you certifications or offer you train the trainer programs. Their only and only source is the trainings that the schools they are associated to organize, or some kind of government programs. So there is definitely a need in the marginalized community, not just for the students, but for the teachers and the trainers working there as well. How we are going to address it is the larger problem.
Yes, and I think there is scope for us in BECFI also for this. You know.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a topic that can have a session, a blog, a discussion on its own merit, because Dilo, as you're aware, this is something I'm really, really passionate about. You know, having gone through the journey myself, that pre-service trainers or trainers looking to transition from being a teacher to a trainer, or getting into business communication training, or any kind of upskilling, there's a huge need which has to be addressed if, you know, training has to have any hope for surviving in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a takeaway for us in BECFI. What can we do about it? I think that's there.
Also,
yes, Nilambari.
People have, you know, what I found, I mean, for 10 years, I would keep telling our colleagues, our people who work at the NGO, you must better your English. I would give suggestions for books, blah, blah, blah. I realized, you know, they don't have time, you know, they cook at home, they don't, then they leave, they spend 2 hours in commute. Since the pandemic, most of our teachers have joined our online English class. So I feel so, you know, happy to see that, because it's not that they don't want to do it. It's just that the Indian reality, especially for women, is just so harsh. So I think really, yes, I mean, having a online training for train the trainers would be a great thing, really.
Yes,
maybe just an app, you know, which they can even use while traveling.
Great.
Good thing, but then we need to first collect the names, send out a needs analysis, and then design the course on what they need. It was a longish process, but I think it's a good idea.
Yes.
Here I have a slightly different perspective, Nilambari. I mean, earlier, since I used to work in a school and connecting with, you know, some of my ex-colleagues, I have learned that, you know, working hours for them, I mean, earlier they weren't used to the online mode. So I'm okay, getting used to being online, teaching online, none of, you know, books were not available, getting books, etc. online, all of that, okay? The whole challenge for them has been tremendous for teachers. Suddenly, you know, and this is in an international school, so they're already privileged, but their working hours have increased. They have meetings which go on till midnight sometimes. They sometimes have meetings with the directors which begin at midnight. So they are already so fatigued and tired. Plus, you know, like you said, they all have, I mean, everybody's at home now. So they, I mean, at least the ladies, and not only the ladies perhaps, but there are other duties also which they are having to juggle in addition to having to teach their classes of students, you know, etc. So yes, there is a need for this. At the same time, we have to look at it also from the perspective of the learner, in this case, the teachers, when they are so fatigued and so harassed, and you know, that they are even, I mean, they don't have time for even meeting colleagues. Like earlier, you had something, you sat in the staff room, you sorted it out, you went back to class, you know, it was so much simpler connecting with people. Now it's always online and they are not used to online. So even that, I think, is a big challenge. Not that I want to, you know, whatever, put a spoke in the wheel and say that no, they might not want to take it, but it's also a reality that for them it is extremely difficult.
Yeah. Chai, that's why a needs analysis. No? Really, do you want training? If so, how many hours do you want? What kind of training you want? We'll have to do a needs analysis. If they don't want, they don't want. If they don't have time, that's fine.
No,
but there are many
but Lalita, it's also that they might want.
Whether possible, it's not a question of want, right?
Understood. But if they cannot, see, it's their choice. Again, in the online learning, it is a learner's choice.
If I could just
definitely
add a point here. I agree with what Chai has said, that yes, and it's not just the pandemic. Even before the pandemic, the school teachers, or even the teachers at high school or college level have always been overworked and they're overwhelmed. They have other things to do in addition to teaching classes. So there's very little incentive to seek any kind of upskilling courses. And now to that you add the pandemic, where women especially have to balance both house and work. So yes, they will not be very inclined to sign up for additional training. So perhaps in our need analysis, or maybe even the kind of approach we can take to training could be different. You know, we could think about how we can give them these language skills, which, you know, make sure that they don't conform to the traditional webinar sessions. Maybe think of a different way wherein they can still attend the sessions, but it doesn't seem like too much. Something like, I don't know, somebody said, you know, while they're going, while they're cooking or they're cleaning, they're just on the phone or talking to somebody. Maybe we could look at how we design these courses that we're going to offer them, so it makes it easier for them to register.
Right.
You know, Shweta, I think we are talking more
Lalita,
of trainers.
I find Radhika some hands up. Let's ask them. Radhika Prasad, your hand is up.
Yeah, I think this has been a lovely session, and I'm really impressed with, you know, the things for the marginalized youth. But I had a question, like, can we catch them young, like maybe in grades 8 to 10 or, you know, 8 to 12, and kind of, you know, have separate program? Because once they are into the job market, their focus is different. So it is better, I feel, that, you know, catching them young in rural government schools. So can we think of any inputs, and if we think of inputs, how will they be different than that for the youth? You know, so that was my question. Thanks.
Yeah, it's the question is open to anyone to answer. I mean, Radhika's question, very, very important. We haven't been addressing the school.
Yes, madam. We can follow the example given by Babar Ali in West Bengal. He became the youngest headmaster at age 16. He had his own school with his classmates. He had his unofficial school running in West Bengal. So everyone can follow the example of Babar Ali. It's an open book. One more thing is, the skills should not be making ills. The online classes have become a nightmare for the teachers, because many of them never wanted to change, because human tendency doesn't want to change immediately. We resist change. Any change we don't suddenly accept. So we have to adjust depending on the times. If we are somewhere we doesn't want to change, we'll be just left behind, and a new generation, a new wave will surge ahead. So we have to take the move on the coup, and we should do that on the war footing. When something is demanding, we have to accept that one. If we do not want to change, then we cannot bring any development. And one more thing is, if you simply complain, there will not be any development, and no involvement is also not making any development. So there may be a big talk, but how far this English is, we are assimilating to the youth. We are bringing in front of their houses to make them involved in the game. That's a big question still in rural India when you take the rural sector. And I think Bob Bradley has really done a marvel in his village in Gangapur in West Bengal. I personally feel that one. He has given a good example. And Sudha Murthy, I tell you one example. She is doing a e-Halli program. Every village, weekend she is going and inspecting how far the Indian youth, younger generation from the age group 9 to 18 years are competent with latest technology. The Infosys Foundation has given them computers. E-Halli program is a very old program in Karnataka that is carried forward in these 35 years. I want to mention this on record. Thank you, madam.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone wants to respond to Radhika's question, that what can be done for them at school level? I mean, thank you, Ananta. Your response too is relevant. And anyone else?
Can I say something?
Sure, please, Durga Mohan.
Yeah, I say my experience with higher education is that there is a simple, what shall we say, premise, not even premise, let me say a truth. I have students who are passing out, say, this year. And if somebody is good at, when I say communication, English language skills, it boils down to that. They get a higher salary, they get a better job, they get a job faster than others. They all sit in the same, what you call, for the same company. It just happened, I think, last week. So I had a mock session with them online. And I could sense that there were 2 students who will get selected. I never told them. And only those 2 got selected. And what is it that made the difference between them? It's not the content, the way they put it across. So if this can be instilled, that, this is my personal experience of living in Delhi NCR for 40 years now, teaching for 20 years at the higher education level, is that English language skills make you somebody who is, a wrong word to use, elite. That means you belong to a different section of the society and you're treated differently. You get a better salary, you get better hikes, people listen to you. Now, if this can be instilled, that look, this is how it's going to benefit you, automatically, especially in the marginalized youth, they get motivated because it leads to a better standard of living or better living for them and for their own, family, etc., etc. So that should be, one of the key things that motivate people. That's what, At the same time, I also agree with others who said that, I think, even after a long period of time, I think Neelamri said this, that, people don't, her own colleagues who are trainers, it's difficult for them to change. It is a fact. Because, what Anand said is learning, unlearning, relearning. This is a very, very difficult process. So this unlearning, relearning for me is, a kind of a big, big challenge, because, it is like, is it Biden or Biden? I give you a small example. It takes some time. It took me some time for me to change to Biden because I is I for Americans, So that kind of a thing. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, this is a wonderful discussion and we would not like it to stop. Please, you all know our email ID, BECFI. Any suggestions, any thoughts, any plans that you feel you would need collaborators or people to bounce off ideas, send us a mail. And we can even organize a kind of informal chat session to discuss a single idea. I mean, that is the purpose of this group, to support each other, to collaborate with each other, just connect, communicate, collaborate. That's our motto. So I think it's time now, and we'll close the session. Ishita, should we close it?
There's one thing I'd like to say. If anybody wants, think of putting it even in our LinkedIn group or in our website, any ideas on this, most welcome. Please share your ideas in our LinkedIn page, most of you have, or even in our website. We'd love to hear from you on what you felt about this session.
Yes, yes. And let's not end it here. I mean, there is so much to do. There is so much scope. We just want this to be the beginning. Okay. So thank you everyone for joining and for staying. And a special thank you to the speakers for, setting the tone, such an inspiring tone. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
so
much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone. It has been
Thanks
wonderful.
a lot. Thank you very much. It was really endearing and very heartening and enlightening. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.